What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Agency Freedom Podcast. We help insurance professionals move from captivity to freedom. I'm really excited for this conversation because my guest is into some stuff that I think is just really interesting and exciting and innovative, dynamic. We're talking about leveraging AI to do some really cool things in the industry. And also, Patrick has really made a game of Facebook groups and building these micro niches and becoming the mayor of Niche Town, as I like to call it. So, Patrick Murakami, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man. This is awesome. You know, knowing some of the guests that have been on here, I'm like, feels surreal to be here, honestly. So thanks for having me.
You know, I really got to give credit where it's due. I think Brandon Rondon was the one to introduce us, if I remember correctly.
Yep, Brandon
And
and Tyler Woodall.
yeah, and Tyler Woodall too, right?
Yep,
Yeah, I recorded with Tyler last week, and I'm recording with Brandon next week. So it's
awesome.
like, man, I just got some cool guests this season of 2024, man. So I think you and I are both probably equally excited to be having this conversation.
1000%.
You know,
Yeah.
I always love starting off with the human side of things with any guest that's on our show. I'd love to hear whatever story of your background you want to get into, how you found the industry, your family, your hobbies, whatever you're into on the human side of things before we jump into talking shop. So take us away, man. What's the Patrick story?
Certainly. So there's a couple of parts here that go into it. So my family, my grandparents, my grandfather came to the United States about 4 years post Pearl Harbor, and he did his mandatory military service in Japan, came over here. My grandmother did not want to come over here. And he tried farming for about 3 months and absolutely hated it. So he was looking around, figuring out what to do. He ended up joining the U.S. Army. His first duty station was in Honolulu, Hawaii. So he was hated by everybody. He was hated by the
Mm,
Japanese people that lived there. He was hated by the people in the military that worked with him because he was Japanese. And somehow he pushed through all that. And 22 years he served. My grandmother loved that military lifestyle so much and thought it was so important to be able to pursue education, to be able to get hands on training and experience. So she actually made all four of her kids go and serve in the military. So my uncle retired as lieutenant colonel from the Air Force. My other uncle was
mm.
a mathematician engineer. My aunt was a Vietnam vet. My dad did 2 stints to Vietnam through the Navy. So I'm really proud of that story to know that they could come over in the hardest of times, right? And to be assigned, almost the hardest task during that time and come out and thrive on top of that.
Wow.
So the second part really is for my story is that at one point I went through major depression, multiple suicide attempts because I felt like that I was just unpurposed. And, coming out of a really, really bad relationship, and all these things. So my identity was kind of into that relationship. And so I did so many things to cross off the bucket list, so many things to really try different things. So, I worked on independent films and movies, got a chance to do some acting for Spike TV, was on scene for sets for, TV shows like 16 and Pregnant and The Biggest Loser. And, so we did a lot of these different things in the film industry. I also got poetry published and was part of kind of the slam poetry scene, which is kind of like competition poetry with some hip hop
Hmm.
elements. So all these things to kind of
So
cross
cool,
off the
man.
bucket list, right? But I was really trying to find who I was. And during this time, I'd always been in insurance since I was basically 21 years old. And thankful that I got the experience. Very different path than most agents because I came from the call centers. So I spent
Yeah.
almost a decade with Progressive, did a small stint in finances, and then
Mm,
spent 3.5 years with USA before launching my own agency.
mm.
So no real sales experience, I guess, because I never did a call out. I never had to go find my own lead or opportunity. Um, Somewhere in between that time, my wife had launched a business, and so we helped her basically utilize social media. And about 6 years in, she said, "You know what? You're looking up sales calls and you're looking up videos to be inspired every day. That's not how somebody should live." She goes, "You should find something that just inspires you and you get up and you're ready and you're hungry and you want to go do that." And so, because of her, I ended up opening my own agency. It took a long time to think about that, about 6 months. I also was live streaming on Twitch. We used to host a digital open mic for poetry, and every Sunday night we'd have between 75 to 250 people show up. One night we had 5,000 people show up, and it's just really interesting that I used that skill set to be able to learn how to build online tribes, utilize Facebook and Facebook groups and private groups to be able to grow our agency. So we're just a little bit over $3 million in 4 years, off of $260.
Man. And that's 3 million in revenue.
3 million in sales. So going from 50K income to a 300K income in 4 years is mind-boggling.
Still, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you.
Man, I'm going to start at the beginning of what you talked through. I had no idea of the story with your grandfather. That really rings true. My dad served, my brother served in the Air Force Reserve. He's a captain on the medical corps and
Nice.
did a tour in Afghanistan. My dad was a Vietnam vet. I just have tremendous respect for the families of the armed services members. I was foolish in my 20s and declined the offer to be a cargo pilot for the Air Force. I was literally too tall to fit in the cockpit of their fighter jet. And 18-year-old me said, well, if I can't fly a fighter jet, I don't want to fly anything, and decided against that course. It's a regret for sure. But to hear the story and to know the bigotry and ignorance and just ridiculous behavior that Japanese Americans had to deal with in the post-World War II era. It's as a person who is the majority demographic in every demographic. I am a suburban white Protestant heterosexual male. It's like I am the definition of majority demographic. My heart really goes out to the people, of course, but also family members of those that experience discrimination based on things that they have absolutely no control over.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the courage of your grandfather to endure that ridiculous behavior for 22 years of service. I have to think there's probably many horrible episodes of just unkind behavior and words that he had to deal with that made him a stronger person, which then made his offspring stronger, which then made you stronger.
What's really interesting is that my grandmother never let me hear any of the negative things that he had to go through. And I think that was her power, right? Is that she always wanted the experience for us to be unique. She always wanted us to experience life on our own. And my father was the same way. It wasn't until probably I was 18, 19 that I first heard about some of the stories from him in the military. And because my dad knew how to make a really tight bed, he got to carry the flag for his training corps and his group, and for me, not having served, I didn't understand what an honor that was for him. And so hearing those types of stories, I go back now and it's I want to learn more about the things that my grandfather went through. And it's so interesting because my dad never really talked about his military service. And, now kind of getting diagnosed with PTSD, I kind of understand why. Like you, I tried to, had an opportunity to go and serve and then end up blowing out my knee playing football my senior year of high school. So I didn't get a chance to go do that. And then the second time I was going to be a corpsman in the military. And that was the day that found out that, I had a baby coming. So there was no way that she was going to allow me to go. But when we look at kind of that dynamic of coming to this country, my wife came over when she was about 4 years old from South Korea. Her parents were in their 40s, had $100 in their pocket. And when I think of the adversity of what they've had to go through, because I felt like that I'm a little bit more close to that story than my grandparents. My wife has been the interpreter for her parents since she's been 5 years old. Even to this day, she does every single doctor's appointment. She translates on the phone. She takes them to their appointments. All of these different things that people don't think of because they grew up here speaking the language. But my father-in-law has worked on some of the most beautiful hotels all over the world. We're talking the Ritz-Carlton in India, Japan, Aspen, Colorado. And because he couldn't speak English, he was always underpaid. He was always kind of the first one to let go when things got rough with these companies, and then they'd bring him back. But I remember I met them when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old because we all went to the same church growing up, and my wife and I are about 6 months apart in age. They all crammed into a single bedroom apartment, and it was her sister, her parents, their grandma. So 6 of them basically living in a single bedroom apartment. And to go from that to buying a home, to buying a brand new build several years later, to my wife basically building an entrepreneur empire where she hasn't had to have new clients or seek new clients in over 7 years because it's just on repeat. To be able to watch and see that, and to know her my entire life essentially, and to see what she's developed because her parents worked so hard and taught that work ethic, and then for her to turn around and also give that option and that availability to me years later. So, you know, it's amazing to see like the adversity and overcoming that, but also I think establishing and going through those things definitely makes you appreciate what life throws at you and knowing that you can overcome that adversity.
Man, that is a beautiful statement. I wish I could put that on repeat over and over again. When I chop this episode up and bring the cut downs to YouTube and TikTok, I think that is definitely going to be on there, man. That's so powerful.
Thank
You
you,
know,
man.
you answered my next question of, and I was going to word it gently, of course, but what was it about your journey where you chose to not serve or you weren't able to serve or whatever? But makes perfect sense. You know, blowing out your knee and having a baby, it kind of adjusts the way that you choose to spend
Yeah.
your time. So you are, third generation American coming from a very proud upbringing of courageous immigrant grandparents, and then your wife has a very similar story once removed. It's, man, I love hearing those stories. It is so powerful. I don't know if you heard the episode with Cyrus Jaffrey
Oh yeah,
a few weeks
yeah.
ago.
He's
Um,
incredible.
but his story, it's not exactly the same as yours, of course, but also a story of an immigrant childhood and upbringing, coming into a country not your own, learning the language. I think he came here like 11 or 12 years old, post the war in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
And yeah, it just anytime I get to talk with someone who is outside of the normal box for the industry and hear stories of success, of overcoming odds, of leaning forward and being so courageous and diligent and finding your own path. And as we'll talk about here in a second when we pivot to industry stuff, like, you're doing your own thing. Like, you found a lane to travel in and you're doing it very well. Man, like, this is the juice of this podcast, man. Every time I start thinking, we're all 150 episodes in, I'm getting kind of tired of being a podcast host. A conversation like this comes along and is like, holy crap, this is awesome. I love hearing stories like this.
well,
Let's go,
you're
man.
providing a great space for people, and that's the best part about these things, right? Is that you just never know what you're going to see and what you're going to experience. So give yourself kudos, man. That's not that's a lot of work to be able to get to that, and the fact that you're still going, that's super inspiring.
Well, bro, we could just have a mutual inspiration thing going because I love hearing stories of overcoming inertia and potential negative energy and like all these opportunities to give up or do something that was less hard,
Yeah.
less difficult, less challenging. And you said, nah, I'm going to do the hard thing. I'm going to go down the hard path. Bravo, man. That is fantastic. I'm going to just pivot here and talk about some of the stuff that you're doing because I heard from Brandon and from Tyler and from your name has come up a few times. I had heard it before, but not in the context of have him on the show. But you're doing some really cool stuff with AI and the way that you have leveraged big data and analytics in your agency in some ways that most people probably aren't familiar with. Why don't you walk us through some of the toys that you've deployed, and then we can talk about how you got to this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, much like everyone else, ChatGPT is the poster child for AI for good reason, right?
Yep.
And if you're not on the paid version, I mean, you need to get on there. That's
What are
it's
you doing if you're
available.
not on the paid version?
Yeah,
It's $20 a month.
right. And it's a write off, right? Because it's a system, it's a tool. But
Yep.
where a lot of the time spent, honestly, is just practicing and learning different prompts. Prompt engineers are on track for $1.2 billion in income this year. Last year was 900 million. The fast forwarding of yourself, the fast forwarding, and if you look at the reverse engineering prospect of what you don't know and how to leverage that. So there probably isn't something that I haven't thought of for my business that I can't use Chat GPT for, whether it's writing a blog, whether it's finding out what my competitors are using for their keywords and SEO. And now I don't have to pay somebody all those things, creating content ideas, optimizing my profiles, keywords, hashtags, catchy titles, creating pictures, videos. I mean, there really is not anything that you can't do, but it's also then taking profiles for my individual agents, creating KPIs, creating, trackers, being able to, I learned this from Brandon, being able to screenshot a photo and then have it turn around and create an Excel sheet for you. But we're coding, we've created websites. I mean, there really isn't a whole lot that you can't do, but the best part is that I didn't know how to do any of those things. I didn't know anything about coding. I didn't know anything about this SEO process and outranking people on Google and all these things. But guess what? I was able to plug in the right prompts to learn all these things. And so what I found is that, like, so many people are so afraid to even just touch the AI. And when you realize that all the things that you should be doing, now you have no excuse not to get it done. Does that change? Not overnight. It's a lot of work. It's, being able to remember and be specific and create those things and do all that. But then you start to realize why it's so important for people to have these things, and why it's so important to have maybe a content manager or a social media manager or somebody who specializes in all these things. Because as agency owners, most of us wear so many different hats. And while we do wear a lot of these hats, a lot of it is just kind of out of necessity because it has to get done, right? Especially if you're a one-man band or you've recently started, maybe you don't have the ability to hire on a CPA. Maybe you don't have the ability to hire somebody for marketing and all these things. Well, at least now you have a proven method or a proven tool that will help you to be able to execute those until you are ready to do that. And so being able to separate really how much time and energy are you spending versus how much time and energy could you save to be focusing on the things that you're really great at and focusing on that zone of genius, and then removing yourself and allowing either the system or somebody else to take those other things off your plate.
Love it. What are, say, 2 or 3 specific things that you have chosen to leverage ChatGPT for in your agency on a regular, ongoing basis? I know you mentioned in our pre-call that you had trained it to do some special things. You want to talk about that for a second?
Certainly. So we've created a GPT where it basically reads and interprets contracts. So we basically give it a knowledge base, which is basically a lot of copying and pasting of contracts, understanding insurance, making sure that it doesn't deviate, or in the term that they use is hallucinate, meaning that there's no guesswork. If it doesn't know, it doesn't know. And so now, because we fed it contracts from 10 to 12 different carriers, we have a better understanding to say who can write this, who is going to cover this, what's the difference between this carrier and that carrier. And so now we can go directly to that contract, highlight that one page, copy and paste it, and send it to our clients to say, hey, in comparison, maybe this is the price you're paying. However, this carrier doesn't offer this, and here's this in this contract in case you want to see it. But it also allows us to also take our clients' policies, run it in there, and do a direct comparison to see what's covered, what's not covered.
No, so it's almost like having your own little underwriting engine inside of your agency.
Yes, but we can also turn around and ask it, would this be covered? And again, if it doesn't know, it does know. But a lot of times say, no, I found this in the exclusion, so this would likely not be covered.
Hmm. Now, have you ever talked with Fetch Underwriting and I'm blanking on his name right now. Dadgummit, he's been on this show. It's he's in Florida, and I'm blanking on his name. Shame on me. But they basically have a business where they have digested hundreds of policies from a bunch of
Mm,
different carriers, and they've have their own basically generative AI engine for answering underwriting questions
that's very
about.
cool.
It's basically what you've done, but like that's their whole company is
I see.
they've created a service for agents at scale.
No, I haven't, but I'm gonna definitely reach out because it's. I'm sure that they are the knowledge that they have, and maybe being able to compare notes. Um, what's really interesting as well is that like a lot of businesses have kind of, or a lot of people are kind of getting into the SaaS affiliate links, right?
Hmm.
And so what I was able to do was I was able to go ahead and create an entire list of potential candidates that would align with what we do as an insurance agency. And just started basically plugging in websites, plugging in companies that offer it. Does this align with insurance? And at one point, I think I had a list of like 50 or 60 companies that we could reach out to get affiliates and then just basically post a website that said, hey, here's some things for affiliate links for businesses. Feel free to check them out. And people could click on those. And we were getting paid at one point for some of these review companies and some of these companies like FormStack, basically just off of people clicking our links. And so what we were doing is we were basically just generating additional income off of our website from just having these SaaS links.
No kidding. Oh man, that kind of clever is just amazing. I absolutely love it. Bravo,
Thank
man.
you.
There's nothing like finding ways to get paid for doing something you would have done for free.
Right. Right.
Oh, it's beautiful. So you have the underwriting database that you have custom built. What's another one or two things that you're doing with ChatGPT on a regular basis that is off the beaten path? Most agents have never even thought of.
Sure. So the this is kind of a newer one, but we're trying to get auto celebrations going. And what I mean by that is that anytime my team issues a policy, we plug it into ChatGPT and it kicks out not only content for the agent, but also content for the customer. And when we get those auto generated pieces of content, the idea is that we can feed it into a system or forward it so that way, like Zapier or something like that, where it'll auto post to be able to go ahead and send that directly to the client that says, hey, thank you so much for celebrating with us or for starting your policy with us. We just want to go ahead and send you a celebration. And moving forward, we're going to remember this anniversary date. Right. And so we treat it very much like a relationship. But also on the back end, I want my agents to be able to celebrate that. It's good for their social media. It's good for them as well. So to be able to do those and then generate an auto review link or text message that goes out to these clients. So now everybody gets a chance to already have that content pre-created, and they can go and
Mm.
celebrate not only customers but my agents, and then obviously for our own on our business page and things like that. So not quite exactly where we want it to be, but we are getting at least the content auto created with the names. Now it's just a matter of can we backdoor it to go out to all those social media sites and things automatically.
Maybe not the same way for the social media sites, but I bet if you got partnered up with one of these card companies that
Mm,
does the robotic handwriting, like
yep.
Thanks.io is one that we're looking at right now
Sure.
that is Zapier compatible. I bet you could find a way to have ChatGPT kick something over to Thanks.io if you already had that person's information.
Yeah, and Thanks.io, I mean, it probably wins. Maybe I'll just have to check to see if they have a plugin right through ChatGPT, because most of these AI companies are utilizing ChatGPT for the writer or all that stuff anyhow. So I'm sure you're right, and actually, I'm going to remember to go and check that out after this episode. I'll get back to you on that.
I know we found out that Thanks.io has an integration with InsuredMine, which is our
Oh,
CRM of choice.
nice.
I would imagine they may have um, other integrations, but if they don't, then it's Zapier Connect, and I think ChatGPT is on Zapier, right?
It is. And then where we've also been kind of trying some new things is also auto populating into Slack. as
Hmm.
well. So having some of these Slack channels automate when our Zoom meetings happen, or if we issue a policy, can it backdoor to go from Slack to agency Zoom, things like that. So there's a lot of different other ways that we can also try to populate that as well.
Hmm. No, I love that, man. The possibilities once you start asking about how can we blank. Nick Ayers a couple of weeks ago posted, should I implement generative AI in my agency? And it's like, not until you know the problems you're trying to solve.
100%.
It could be an absolutely terrible idea if you start implementing AI without having a clear path that you're trying to walk down.
Yes.
No, I think this conversation is a perfect example of that, and yeah, I'm kind of flabbergasted and my wheels are turning now. It's like, wait a second, I need to do more of that in my agency.
Yeah.
There's certain things that I can improve on.
Yeah. And again, I
So
mean, you've had so many cool guests on here, people that, it's humbling to say that you've heard of my name out there because I'm listening to the people you're talking about that you've had on guests. And like I said, to be here after some of these people have been on here, it's surreal. Um, but what I love about our industry is that people are willing to collaborate, people are willing to listen, people are willing to share. And very few industries, especially in the financial world, can you find that.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't really happen, does it?
Mm-mm.
Having the willingness to say, yeah, these are the good ideas that I have. What are the good ideas that you have? And people just share freely. I swear, the day that I realized, and somebody has said this, somebody a lot smarter than me, I'm sure, was like, it doesn't matter what you share. No one's going to do anything with, well, not no one. 95% of people will not do anything with what you share them. You can give them all of your best ideas. You can give them the roadmap. You can give them all the resources, and they will still do nothing with it
Correct.
because their patterns are what their patterns are, and they're not willing to change.
Yep. I agree. Yeah.
Man, so let's pivot and talk about the Facebook groups. You have done that at a very high level. How did you get started in the group game on Facebook? How did you realize that that was something that you wanted to be involved in, even before you started creating your own?
So honestly, I didn't know that that was going to be something I wanted to be a part of. In fact, I actually tried to get rid of social media probably around that 6 month time where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But my wife was really kind of one of the first people where she thought it was important for our relationship where she would tag me in everything. And now it's a really common practice, but 15 years ago, not many people were doing it. And so I thought that was really interesting for our relationship. But she was like, I just want you to have these in your memories. And but when I tried to get rid of it, people were direct messaging her, asking her what was wrong with us, what was wrong with me. Did we break up? One guy asked her on a date, all these things. And she was like, I can't do this. You need to stay on. And so if you go back and look at a lot of my old content, it's all memes. Nothing personalized. Maybe every once in a while it was something about me and my spouse, and again we were probably a lot of the stuff was before we were actually married. But as I go back and the memories come up and things like that, a lot of it was just posting in the moment. There was no copy, no explanation as to what it was, and in some ways it was very pure, right? But also, as you get better and better at social media, you realize that sometimes it's not what you say, but how you say it. Sometimes it's captivating and being able to explain the moment. Sometimes it's also being able to just use that as a picture, as a hook, to convey the message that you really want to say. And so, these are things that have all been learned over a fast forwarded amount of time. And yeah, I was in different groups on Facebook. Yeah, I was, posting about my business, but much like most people who are starting, I think one of the very first things that you notice when people either start a business is that they start finding and looking for the memes based off their industry, or they start doing lives. And because they're told, hey, this is how you get in front of people. And so what I realized is that I was posting content about my business, but I was getting zero traction. And it's not that people weren't seeing it. It's just that when you go and start posting about your business, very few people care about what you're doing because they don't care about you as an individual.
Yeah.
And I think we've all probably played that game where like posting, cross posting from our business, talking about, you know, man, you really need to get life insurance because you never know what's going to happen, right? And we've all gone through all the same things. But what I was able to find was I got connected in a group, and there were so many people that were like, hey, as an insurance agent, I need to have these types of contacts. Who wants to connect? Um, there was, on the other hand, several agents who were like, hey, I can save you money. Give me a call. And so for me, the basis of how do I want to connect with people? How do I want to actually serve people?
Oh man.
Was not coming from price. And so we have a saying, we have a couple sayings in our office. First one says that the only thing that can't be fixed is how people feel when they walk away from you. And two is how you find them is how you lose them. And so if you acquire them strictly off of price, you're going to lose them because somebody else found a better price. But if you
Yep.
acquire them off of education, if you acquire them off of better service, man, it's going to be tough for them to leave because they're not going to get better service from somewhere else. And if they do, they probably deserve that, right? So,
Yep.
we put ourselves in a position where it's ours to lose, not ours to win. And because of that mentality, we just know it doesn't matter if it's a year, 6 months, 3 days from now, at some point you will reach back out to us because we provided superior service. And that's the same mentality that we took to social media. This is a full time job. I either can go and try to find money to pay for leads that are recycled that other agents are doing, or I can create my own opportunities. And so we started challenging the general education of people within this particular group. And we would ask questions like, has your agent ever told you the state increased rates? Because that's actually not true. Do you know what full coverage actually means? And it's so we'd start getting some buzz, but then we also started figuring, what, while those are good and it's in some ways, it rubs people the wrong way because it is going against the grain. What we also started realizing is here's an opportunity where if we wanted to connect with people, why connect at an office? Why not go support small and local businesses? So we started asking, who's your favorite coffee shop? Who's your favorite auto broker? Who's your lender? Who's your
Yep.
realtor? And we started getting plugged into supporting small and local businesses. Because of that, that basically gave us a leverage to know that we could connect with potential clients any and everywhere. But more importantly, we could show support as a small and local business owner to be able to help them, to understand what their pain points are. Because the more data that I had for that, the more I knew that I could provide solutions. And again, if I drop a card here and I follow up, a week later, maybe they don't remember me. Maybe they don't realize, what I did. But at least they have my information. And I go back, the more often I go back, the more they realize who I am. The more they realize I'm here to support. And so we basically built an entire following in our entire agency for 2 years strictly off of just being tagged within these groups because we'd bring other business owners to these groups. Fast forward 2 more years later, the group's up to 80,000 people. And now I partnered up with the owner of the group. We have a couple of different endeavors now that we're putting together. Coaching platform, selling Air AI together, helping other businesses kind of get on automation, get on AI. I also was brought in to help monetize another large group in South Carolina. I think they're up to 115,000 members. 2 or 3 months ago when I joined, it was like 75,000. So a lot of these opportunities, a lot of these groups to be able to get seen, to be able to showcase the leverage and the power of social media, but also to be able to introduce people into a whole different form of tribe and working together. And now we've got like certification programs for some of these groups to make sure that they've gone through a vetted process and that they want to be seen by consumers as a company that's transparent and as a company that's good for the consumers. And so a lot of things that the BBB has done, we basically accelerated and almost taken it to the next level because we can do it online and do it at a much faster rate. But that does include that we can find people who can mediate for us. We can find people who are willing to check on these things and you don't have to go through a 2-week vetted process. We can verify a lot of that stuff in the same exact day. So, just a lot of different processes that come along with that. But more importantly, for us as a community, knowing that we get to support those, and in turn, people naturally, they know what we're about, and so it's not about price. It's not about um, popularity contests. It's because we are generally can showcase all the things that we're doing to help and support others.
Yeah, and we've all heard the phrase, they don't know how much they don't care how much you know until they know how much you
Yeah,
care. And I go one step further and say they won't care how much they know until they feel that
I
you
love that.
care.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And they have to feel it. One of the things that I am, strangely enough, like on my speaking engagements this spring, I have 3 different people that all said that they wanted to have me talk on the topic of emotional intelligence
Mhm.
and empathy in the sales process.
Yes,
And when people reach out and say, "Hey, I want to consider having you come be a speaker for our event or our organization, whatever," I have a small menu of topics that I give them and say, "Great, these are the things that I'm talking about this year. Which of them interests you?" All 3 of my speaking, like in-person gigs this spring, all chose emotional intelligence and empathy in the sales
I
process.
love that.
And you just got one of my lines. People don't care how much you know until they feel that you care. And it's like the whole notion of empathy is that you can't fake empathy.
No,
You
you
can't
cannot.
fake caring. You can't have a script or something where you act like you care. Here's an idea. Why don't you try actually caring
Yeah.
and feel it in your soul so that it comes out of you naturally? So you don't have to worry about your script because you can just have human interaction and people can tell, oh, this person cares
Yes.
about their community, about my business, about their stakeholders, whatever. That is that is the drum that I'm banging hard. And everything that you just said just then is like spot on, man. Like in the context of caring and having a high emotional intelligence, because the main component of emotional intelligence, the first component is self-awareness.
Mm.
And when you're coming into a Facebook group and you're like every blessed agent out there, hey, let me give you a quote.
Yeah, I'm a broker. I can
You're
shop
like a
around with
cow
multiple
chewing cud.
companies. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so my team and I, we've actually researched the difference between our copy versus other people's responses. And we actually win out probably about 90% of those opportunities based upon our copy and the responses that we do because it feels custom, because it feels personalized. And it's interesting that you talk about EQ and emotional intelligence because that's so big for me. I'm actually writing a book on emotional intelligence. I'm actually going through it, and it's 52 weeks of emotional intelligence that we're going through with my team on a week to week
Mm.
basis. But it's so important. And the biggest difference between what people who don't study and implement a lot of the emotional intelligence is that they are basically they're waiting for the numbers to come back to see if it fits. I win a lot of my quotes before the quote is even delivered because they've already developed trust, because they know what
Yep.
I'm about and they know the education that comes with it. But I think it also gives you and empowers you to be able to turn around and say, look, I know how you're feeling. I know that money is tight. I know emotions, that finances are emotional. But would you
Yep.
rather take your chance on somebody who's basically just going to try to sell you something really quick? Or would you rather take your chance on somebody who's taken the time to explain everything and go in depth with you? And when you can have that confidence to know that, to be able to turn around and say, look, I know how you're feeling. A lot of times people just assume that we're robots. They just assume that we're just delivering numbers. But when you turn around
Yep.
and say, has anybody taken the time to explain this to you? How are you feeling right now? I don't want you to make a decision based off of not having that conversation with your spouse because I get it. When they understand that you know what they're going through, it brings them back down to that human level. Um, One of the greatest things that I've been able to implement over the last couple of weeks, really, that I've been sharing it with my team, is the word or the phrase that says, "What are the chances?" Dot dot dot. And when you can ask this question, and again, I challenge everybody to go start using this. Right, use that when you're ordering your Starbucks. What are the chances I can get, a croissant with that? What are the right? What are the chances I can get an upgrade at the hotel? But when you ask that question, all of a sudden, people, they by nature, people want to help. So if
Yeah.
they can, the chances are, unfortunately, there's no chance that I can do that. But if there is a chance, now they're going to try
Yep.
and act on it and try to help you with that. Hey, what are the
Man.
chances that we can get on the phone call today to run some quotes for you? What are the chances that I can get you back on the phone this week to review that? And when you start implementing those questions, what are the chances I can get a call back from you today? It almost feels like, you know what? Hey, I committed to something, and I'm a man of my word, or I'm a woman of my word, so I'm going to get ahead and get back to you.
Now, I love that line of thinking, and I don't know, a long time ago, a couple of years ago at least, I came upon the phrase that seems to work well for me. It's basically exactly what you just said, but the language that I have used for a long time is, if I asked you nicely, would you be able to?
I like that.
And you look them right in the eye and be like, hey, if I asked you nicely, would you be able to give me a croissant? Or, hey, if I asked you nicely, could I get a lower cost for this product? Or if I asked you nicely, would you be able to meet today instead of next Monday? And it's like, if I asked you nicely, would you be able to ...
Like
And
that.
it's like, yeah, right alongside. I mean, what you said is a great line too. What are the chances?
Yeah.
But there's something about looking someone in the eyes with a smile on your face and saying, if I asked you nicely, would you ... Because the world is so presumptuous. They're in such a hurry. So many people are rude and transactional. The person on the other side of the counter is just an obstacle for them.
Yeah.
But it's like looking someone in the face, validating their humanity, and making a simple request that's predicated on the acknowledgement that this person has power. This person has agency. They are free to say no if they choose. If they say no, there's no consequences to them. But if they say yes, they get to explore the possibility of something else.
Yeah, we could talk about EQ and PQ for
Oh,
an
I
hour.
love it, baby. I love it so much.
Like,
Oh,
because you're disarming somebody from being on autopilot, right? When you acknowledge the fact that they are a human being, when you acknowledge the fact that they, like you said, you've given them to be empowered to make a decision, right?
yeah.
So I love that.
Man, every single call I make when someone wasn't expecting me starts with, hey, I'm calling out of the blue. Did I catch you at a bad time? And it's like giving them the opportunity to say, yes, it's a terrible time. Do not call me. It's like, I'm sorry. I'll call you back later.
Yeah. How many times have
And
you
then,
actually gotten that response, though?
I mean, maybe 1 out of 20 times someone says, yes, this is a bad time.
Right.
And they almost always say, no, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like almost 100%. Some version of, no, what's going on?
Yeah,
It's like,
we love
okay.
the Jeremy Minor opening that comes in and says, "Hey, I'm not sure if you're the right person to speak with." Right? And immediately it allows them to figure out if they're the right person or not. And if they're not, oftentimes now that they're disarmed, they'll go ahead and get us to the right person. So we bypass the gatekeepers all the time.
All the time. Yeah. And, asking the question, may I?
Yes.
Would it be inappropriate to?
Mm.
Do you mind if I?
Yep.
Is it giving them the power in the conversation? It's respectful for starters. It's a very polite thing to do. It's not presumptuous or assumptive. The whole assumptive close thing is so overdone, man. I hate assumptive closes. You can do an assumptive close, but do it in a gentle way that gives them a clear out. And if they take the out, it just means that there wasn't alignment.
Mm.
And the alignment between value and perception wasn't there.
Yeah.
And thank you for telling me that you're not a good fit. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you tell people all
It's
the
like,
time, it's just
okay.
as much of an interview for you as it is for me, because I have to protect, my peace. I have to protect my time. I have to make sure you're a good fit, not only for me, but for my agents who may deal with you too.
When we look at all of our other clients, we have to decide if you're a good fit.
Yep.
So it's like, oh, wow. That's powerful. What do you mean you're interviewing me? It's like, well, after you say yes, we have to take care of you. And we spend our time servicing your client, your account, and answering all of your requests. So we're interviewing you too. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, man. I feel like we could go on for another couple of hours, man. We got to be careful with time here.
Yeah.
I promised you about a 40-minute interview, and we are 4 minutes over that. So
Yeah.
as we land this plane, Patrick, is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to get into? Is there any comments that you didn't make that you wish you would have?
Yeah, so the last thing I would encourage is basically like if you can't get plugged into a group, right? If you can't find a group that aligns with what you're trying to find, or maybe the rules are too stringent for you, then go and start your own group, right? One, you're investing into lead gen and you're doing it for free. You're using a platform that already provides it, and you just have to find your people. Yeah, it's going to take some time, right? Obviously, there's a lot of tutorials, there's a lot of things that you can go out there, but shoot, use ChatGPT to say, how do I grow Facebook to a large audience, right? Specifically for this, or this. So it's a super easy blueprint. But groups are underrated in on every platform: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Discord. Right. So you find a place where you're comfortable, find the platform that you like to use, and start creating those subspaces. And what's going to happen is that you're going to grow, you're going to connect with people in that space who are like minded, but also it's a leverage of being able to connect with people and fast forward marketing. It's just like networking. You go from one person talking about it to now maybe potentially 80,000 people talking about your business or that you could reach to. And I just did some numbers. If you wanted to reach, let's just say, 80,000 people through Facebook ads, you would have to run, I think, $10,000 in ads to be able to reach that. So create your own opportunities and stop relying on what other people have done, because when you do that for yourself, you control it. You also become the master of it, and then you can teach others.
Wonderful advice, man. No, I knew you had something special up your sleeve, man. You are welcome back anytime. Let's set something up for a few months from now. Let the dust settle from this. Let people actually implement the stuff that you and I have been talking about today, and we'll have you back on sometime later this year to talk about who knows what the second time.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for providing such a great space and the opportunity, and truly thankful.
Man, this is so much fun. I absolutely love conversations like this with agents like you, man. What's your preferred platform when people want to reach out, Patrick, if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so Facebook is the platform I'm on the most, but definitely working on LinkedIn as well. So those would be probably the best ways to reach me. But I try to be an open book, so you type in my name, you'll find me on all the different areas, and I'm happy to connect and meet you wherever you're at.
Awesome. That's a great way to end this episode. So check out the show notes below, folks. We have his social handles there in the show notes. And he is Patrick Murakami. And this is another episode of the Agency Freedom Podcast. Make it a great day, boys and girls. Subscribe if you like this show. Leave us a review. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.